series to help you tackle these uncertain times. Our topic today is the future of ergonomics, how to remain in compliance with ergonomic standards in the face of changing technology and non-traditional work environments. We have Rachel Mitchell from Ergo Consulting as our speaker today. Rachel is the manager of ergonomic services with Ergo Inc., a national ergonomic consulting and training organization. Rachel is a Canadian certified professional ergonomist and a registered kinesiologist with over 16 years of experience. She holds a Master's of Science in Human Factors Engineering from Nottingham University and has over 15 years of ergonomic consulting experience in a range of industries ranging from manufacturing, corporate services to healthcare. She is also the president of the Canadian College for the Certification of Professional Ergonomics. Rachel builds relationships with employers, workers, and unions to ensure successful ergonomics and injury management outcomes, whether it be injury risk reduction, workstation and workflow design, ergonomic program development, or return to work planning. Rachel's webinars always prove to be incredibly popular, and this one I'm sure is no exception. As you can see, we are really lucky to have Rachel with us here today. I will be your moderator. I'm Samantha, and before we get to the formal presentation, I'm going to run through a few housekeeping notes. We will be answering all questions at the end of the presentation. However, please feel free to submit them as you think of them. To submit a question, click the orange arrow to expand the GoToWebinar control panel. Click the question drop-down bar, type in your question and hit enter. You can also use this to let us know if you're having trouble watching or listening to the webinar. If for any reason you lose connection altogether, please give us a call on 1-800-667-9300 and one of our customer service representatives will be happy to help you get back online. I always recommend leaving the webinar presentation and logging back in before you do this. The on and off switch works most of the time. For additional resources following today's presentation, I'll be sending around a copy of the slides and the recording. I've also been given some additional resources from Rachel herself. Please look for that in your email a bit later today. I normally send this out by lunchtime. If you're currently on a trial of OHS Insider, HR Insider, or Safety Now, you will need your login details, to access these resources. Please expect a call today from one of our representatives with these details. Okay, and without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Rachel. Enjoy the presentation.
All right, can we see that okay? We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect, thank you. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to talk a bit today about how to implement ergonomics in non-traditional work environments and with sort of alternative technology. And despite the fact we actually picked this topic several months ago, it feels particularly timely today. I'm going to guess that most of you are sitting in home offices at this moment. Maybe in an office you've been using for some time, but many of you might be scrambling to kind of create a home office with whatever you've got around. So today I'll give us an opportunity to talk about some of those things. Samantha provided a great background information about myself and the company. We are based in Ontario and cover mostly the GTA. And provide a range of ergonomic services in office and industrial environments. As a result of all that is happening right now, we are doing a bit of a pivot in order to find ways to provide services virtually. So I may be able to assist now some of you because I know we've got people listening in from across the country. So the plan for today is to talk a little bit about how these environments have been evolving over time, not just in terms of kind of where we are today, but also those evolutions that we were seeing kind of in the months past before COVID snuck up on us. I'm going to talk about the CSA office ergonomics guideline because it changed in 2017 and it helps to address some of these non-traditional environments as well. So I'll go through some of the updates and guidelines that are being provided from there. And then we're going to sort of go through 3 case studies. We'll talk about hoteling workstations that are becoming more popular in a lot of offices. We're going to talk about home offices, and I did over the last couple of days sort of expand this section and borrow from some time in the rest of the presentation because I think the home office section sort of has become more important here. And then we'll just briefly touch on vehicle workstations. And as mentioned, we will have the handouts sent out to you afterwards so you can have access to all of these slides. So I think what most of us have been seeing over the last little while is a real increase in the use and dependency on technology. So, you know, we're not just doing computer work and email at work. These things are following us home now. So it's been so easy for us to leave work and continue to answer emails while we're taking the train home, you know, while we're sitting on the couch after dinner. And so work has really started to bleed into our personal time. And I think with the situation we're in all right now, you know, many of you may have kids at home, and so you lose time from your work day during the day. And so you might choose to make that up during the evenings. And we really are going to be starting to find that it's really difficult to maintain a sort of distinction between what is work time and what is personal time. As this technology has become more compact, it is so much easier to do things no matter where we go. But also because it is so compact, we're seeing issues with people with their necks from the sort of forward head position that happens when you're on your phone all of the time, and hand and wrist issues from the sort of prolonged gripping of those devices. And then the really sort of thing that most of us are probably hyper aware of right now is this loss of control over your sort of workstation setup, your furniture, the equipment that you have. And so, you know, we have no idea where our employees are working, what they have at home, and that has some, you know, potential impacts on their physical and mental health moving forward. So if we think about how these changes are impacting our employees, you know, we've talked about this loss of distinction between work and personal time. And so we've got this sort of sense that we always have to be on, that we have to respond to emails so quickly. You know, lots of people are telling me that these days it takes them 12 hours to get 8 hours of work done because of all of the other things happening in their houses, the workstations they're sharing with their spouses, with their children, and all of those kinds of things. And that really takes a toll on people. We know that with people being at home, that there's this decrease in social contact, which is going to have an impact on people's well-being. People may feel isolated, particularly people who maybe live alone. And we know that people's social networks are really key to their ability to be resilient, to their kind of sense of belonging. So there's some risk associated with that. And then one of the other things that I think happens is that as we see people being given more technology, being given more resources to get work done, I think there's this impression that we should then be more efficient. And there's sort of a sense of pressure to get more work done, to get work done more quickly, to multitask because we have so much technology at our disposal. And so sometimes these expectations have to take a step back and think about whether they remain realistic. And then because we don't have control over people's work environments as they move into non-traditional locations, you know, people may be in non-ideal equipment. That's going to place stressors on the body. People may be doing more hours at work, and we know people are not moving around as much because people have lost their ability to kind of get out and participate in exercise. Maybe the walk up the 4 flights of stairs to their office was their sort of typical daily exercise, and so there's some loss of those things as well. So if we look at the CSA standard, so this is Z4 12-17, it's an application standard for workplace ergonomics. It's available from CSA. You can purchase it on their website if you've got lots of time on your hands. It is a heavy read and is a fairly substantial and lengthy document. It was overhauled in 2017 for the first time since the year 2000. So it's really the first time that a standard has had an opportunity to consider some of this new technology, some of these new work environments that people are exposed to. So it acknowledges all kinds of things and challenges that did not exist in previous standards. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges and some of those other environments as we go through things today. And they're pulled from this particular standard. Now, the other thing that has happened with this standard is that it changed from a guideline in the year 2000 to a standard in 2017 in order to provide it with more weight. Now, that being said, it still is not a legally enforceable document, even as a standard. But what it means is that if it is adopted by a corporation, it becomes sort of a requirement for corporate due diligence. And we have seen in the past the Ministry of Labor quoting it as a requirement as best practice when they write ergonomic orders related to the general duty clauses. So it can sort of become enforceable in that way. And the general contents of this document are, what are the standards? What is the expectation for a comprehensive ergonomics program? And then it also provides some standards for the design parameters of what office furniture should look like. There are other documents, in the BIFMA standard being one, that is much more detailed in terms of furniture layout, but this does provide a nice sort of overview of those design parameters. So the new things that have sort of appeared in the standard are acknowledgements of psychosocial hazards and factors in the workplace, some recognition of additional working postures and mobile devices. So I want to go through these kind of three main changes and talk about kind of how those are impacting us these days. So traditionally, when we're thinking about hazard identification in an office environment, we think about physical hazards and how we control those physical hazards. So this standard has taken a further step and acknowledged that, we need to do more than just acknowledge the physical hazards. We need to make sure that we're recognizing and controlling psychosocial hazards that happen in the work environment. And the psychosocial hazards are the things that relate to the design and the organization of work. So this might be things about, are there clear work expectations? What kind of workload are we placing on people? What are the psychological demands of their work? Do people feel that they have a sense of control over their work? Do they feel engaged? Are there opportunities for growth for folks? And so those are the kinds of things that we need to start looking for. What we know is that in an environment where there are higher levels of psychosocial hazards, that there is an increased risk to mental health, but also an increased risk to both the onset or the aggravation of existing musculoskeletal disorders. So these psychosocial hazards have the ability to have an impact both on physical and mental health and well-being. So as we go through this, I've got some sort of self-audit questions that I'm going to throw up at the end of each section for you to come back to maybe at a later time to think about, do you have these things in place in your work environment? And are there opportunities for you to improve sort of the environment, the expectations that you have in your workplace now in order to make some changes and some improvements? So, basic questions like, do you provide clear work expectations? Do you provide people with timely and clear feedback? Is there the opportunity for growth? Is there work flexibility? Do people have a way to voice their concerns? Do you have some kind of return to work and accommodation program that goes beyond just physical limitations? Can you manage cognitive and mental health limitations? Are you doing cognitive demands assessments? Are you looking at, what are the jobs that have really high sort of mental demands, and how do we, provide supports and ways for those employees to succeed in those kinds of positions? So the next section that's new in the CSA standard is about variable posture. So the original standard relied really heavy on what we'll refer to as kind of traditional seated postures. But we've been hearing a lot over the last number of years about, sitting and standing, moving around more. And so the standard has made a change here to acknowledge that more movement is important and that we provide people with a wider range of kind of acceptable working postures. So you'll see there's kind of a whole range here from reclined all the way to standing. And the posture in here that's really new is semi-standing, which is the second last one. It's really what would happen if you were sitting on a stool at a standing height workstation. Okay, so really we have to think about how do we get people into these sort of acceptable postures? How do we promote these good postures, but also promote more movement in our workplaces? So some questions for you to consider about your work environment, and that is, do you provide people with the equipment they need to achieve a reference posture, right? Can your employees get into this kind of body posture with the equipment that they have? In your workplace, maybe not in your home office, do you provide more than one style of chair? i.e., do you have chairs that will fit people who are 5'2" and chairs that will fit people who are 6'2"? Is there a range of equipment available to ensure that people can get good fit in the equipment they're using? Chairs with an adjustable seat pan depth in particular is sort of an additional feature that is not always available on all chairs, but it's highly recommended in order to ensure that you can make a seat longer for someone with long legs and shorter for somebody who has shorter legs. So it's a feature that allows you to have a single chair to fit a larger percentage of your population. And then the piece that I think we often overlook is, are we providing people with training on how to use their equipment? So for those of you who are sitting in an office chair right now, and your office chair has more than one button on the bottom, or if you think back to the chair that you used to sit in when you were in an actual office, do you know what every button on your chair does? Most people don't. People know how to adjust the armrest, they know how to make the chair go up and down, but there's a couple of buttons that sometimes do funny things and they're afraid to push them, and then they don't. So if we provide people with equipment and we don't provide them with sufficient training on how to use the equipment, how to get the equipment to the right height, how to adjust it during the day, then we do people a disservice, and we're sort of not making use of, the money that we have spent on providing good quality equipment. Once in a while, you'll run into someone who's put a sticky note on the back of their chair that says don't touch, because someone has shown them how to adjust the chair once and they've set that, and then they never adjust it ever again. And we want people to be comfortable adjusting their equipment so that they can adjust it throughout the day. I'm sitting in an office chair and I will probably adjust my chair a half a dozen times today in order to ensure that I can get myself into a good working posture. One of the things that I always encourage is, if you do have a standard chair in your work environment, then ensuring that you've got some kind of video up on your intranet. Most chair companies will have a video on how to adjust the chair. Get that put up on your intranet, send it out to people as part of a wellness promotion in order to teach people and give them the knowledge that they need in order to kind of make the most of the equipment that you've given them. Okay, moving on to tablets and mobile phones, and I think some of the things that are really important with the situation that we're in right now is that the new standard suggests that any kind of mobile equipment only be used for short durations. Now, there's some argument about what qualifies exactly as a short duration, but there have been some studies that suggest that we should be limiting use of these devices, static postures related to them, to under 10 minutes. Now, if you think about your own personal life, and I ask you to put your cell phone down every time you hit 10 minutes of continued use, I think most of us would find that to be very difficult. But we need to be conscious that working on these phones really pulls our head forward. So if you take a 12-pound head, kind of an average weight of a head, and you start to tip your head forward, what you're going to find is that the loading on the neck can get up to 40, 50 plus pounds because of that forward position. You've basically got a bowling ball sitting on top of your spine, and as you lean forward, the load on your neck muscles increases in order to support that bowling ball and to keep it from rolling forward. So the recommendation is that people really should be taking more breaks from these kind of mobile devices unless folks can get into what we're going to call a reference posture. Again, one of these kind of recommended ideal working postures. So if people are working on tablets and mobile phones, the general recommendation is that they have external devices. So this means that tablets have some kind of external keyboard and people are using a stylus. The newest versions of the iPads have actually been made mouse compatible, I understand, at this point. So again, that sort of effort to provide people with external devices. If people are typing with their fingers, then the recommendation is they use both their thumb and their fingers, but with more dependence on the fingers, and that we use the pad of our thumb rather than the tip of our thumb in order to ensure that the hands are kind of in the best posture. We need to sort of do our best to prevent holding that phone or that tablet up in front of our face, because that static gripping posture is hard on both the hands and the shoulders from having to hold that device up in the air. And as much as we don't like autofill and autocorrect sometimes, as much abbreviation, predictive text that we can use, the better off we're going to be doing with these kinds of tablets and mobile devices. Now, I think the really important part here is really going to be related to how we're using laptops. So the recommendation for laptops is that if you are using it for an extended duration, so I'm going to say if you're sitting at your laptop for more than 30 or 60 minutes at a time, your laptop really needs to be docked. It needs to be docked with an external keyboard and an external mouse at the minimum. You can use an external monitor if you happen to have one, but it is also equally appropriate to stick your laptop up on top of the last Amazon box that came through your door or on a stack of Harry Potter novels in order to get the monitor up at the right height for you. But the goal is to get into the posture that you see in this picture here. Laptops are designed to be used as laptops in transit, not at a workstation that's being used on a regular basis, right? So your laptop is to be used as a laptop when you take it to a conference room, when you're moving somewhere for a short meeting, but not when you're sitting at a desk trying to get a quantity of work done. We really want people hooked up with external devices. So a couple of questions for you to consider. So do you provide your employees with external keyboards and mice? Do people have access to these types of devices, whether they're at home or whether people are using their laptops in an office? The question is really the same. Do you have some kind of assessments? And these days, this sort of definition of assessment probably means virtual. So the ability to speak with someone over the phone or via Zoom with an ergonomist who can provide them with recommendations if people need some kind of specialized equipment. And do you sort of work in a way that you're discouraging people from using their phones to respond to email? So companies that expect people to respond to their email within 20 minutes, that means people are inevitably going to be doing all of their email on their phones. Whereas if there's sort of an expectation that it takes some time to get a response from an email, then people may be more likely to go back and do those responses while they're at their desk, rather than doing it kind of on their phone at the moment. So those are the guidelines that really come out of the CSA standard in terms of what we need to be looking to do as we move forward. So how we use mobile devices, how we use technology, how we recognize what these things are doing in terms of psychosocial stressors for employees and trying to mitigate those things. So I want to take these sort of standards and guidelines and try to apply them now to a couple of case studies. So the first one we're going to talk about are hoteling stations. So we have been seeing over the last couple of years a big change to non-permanent hoteling workstations. Often this is done for sales staff, people who maybe are not in the office all of the time, who might come in periodically, and so there's sort of free workstations that they take when they come. Some places just have like a daily free-for-all and people can kind of sit with whoever they need to work with on those particular days. But these kinds of workstations present some real challenges to employees. So I think the first challenge is that we get a failure of people to adjust equipment. And for two main reasons. One, sometimes people don't know how to adjust the equipment. So again, this comes back to the chair, being really comfortable with the levers and the adjustments of the chair, understanding what it is they're trying to accomplish and how to do that. The other is there's this sort of sense of I can't be bothered to do this because I'm only going to be sitting here for 4 hours, or I'm only sitting here today, or I've just come into the office to do a couple of things. And so if it feels like it's too difficult to adjust the equipment and we're only doing these for short periods of time, then people really don't bother to make those kinds of changes. The other thing that happens with a hoteling workstation is we've just finished saying that laptops should be used with external devices. But if people just show up to work with a laptop, then they don't have those external devices when they're sitting at a workstation. And sometimes workplaces don't want to have shared keyboards and shared mice. And then you get into a situation where people have to have external devices, but they also have to have a locker where they put their keyboard and their mouse away at the end of the day so that they can have them again the next day. So there's sort of some logistics in terms of how we provide external devices, how people store them, are they being shared or not? And then you're going to have some people who need customized equipment. So you've got somebody who needs a left-handed mouse, you have somebody who needs a footrest. How do you provide that to those people? And how do you have that equipment not disappear so that the next time they come in, they have what is available to them? It becomes a lot more difficult to manage and organize this sort of equipment. And then there are the potential sort of social contact issues. So maybe I'm not sitting with the peers that I work with on a regular basis. I know some offices where there are free-for-alls, somebody may come in and there's no space left at a desk where their colleagues are, and they end up sitting in a different area. And there can be some additional stressors in terms of people coming in early to make sure they get spaces kind of with the people they need to work with that day. And so you need to kind of think about the potential consequences and kind of how can you mitigate those if this is the kind of workstation that you're working with in your office when we all get back there eventually. So some things for us to consider as we set up these types of workstations is how do we provide training to people so that they are comfortable using this equipment? How do we make this equipment as easy to adjust as humanly possible? And how do we ensure that it fits as many people as possible? So how do we pick a chair that is going to fit the tall person and the short person? These kinds of workstations are the perfect example of where height adjustable desks make a lot of sense, not just in terms of sitting and standing, but if you make a desk height adjustable, then the person who's 6 feet tall can set their desk at 29 inches, and the person who's 5'2" can set their desk at 26 or 27 inches. And you've eliminated the need for keyboard trays and footrests because everybody is able to attain an ideal workstation surface. And then the other is in terms of how we buy monitors. So you've probably all noticed over the last little while, sometimes the monitor you get has an adjustable slider on the back and you can slide the back of the monitor up and down, but once in a while you run into a monitor that is not adjustable at all. So we need to ensure when we're purchasing equipment that we're buying monitors that either have a slider on the back to allow them to adjust up and down, or we're purchasing monitor mounts, arms that attach to the back of the desk so you can easily adjust the height of a monitor. No one is going to bother pulling out a bunch of copy paper or a box to put underneath a monitor if they're tall to adjust a desk for a single day. And then again, how do you provide a range of external devices, keyboards, mice, footrests? How are you going to store those things? The other thing that is mentioned in the new standard is that there should be an availability to have an assessment if employees need it, and that assessment needs to be completed by somebody who is competent in ergonomics. It doesn't say anything beyond that in terms of what competent qualifies as. I would suggest that you look for someone who is a certified ergonomist through the Canadian College. That's sort of the highest standard for ergonomics within the country here. And as I mentioned before, this idea that you could have, videos up on your intranet that show people how to adjust their chairs will allow people to kind of make those changes and those adjustments on their own. So here are some questions if you were going to do an audit of a hoteling workstation and an employee sitting there. These are some of the questions or the things you would want to check for. So, is the person sitting in a chair that supports their low back? Are their feet supported at 90 degrees at the hip and knees? This probably means the desk is either height adjustable or there are footrests available. Are the elbows at 90 degrees while people are typing and mousing? Is the neck upright with the top of the monitor level with the eyes? And are external devices in use if people are sitting there for more than 30 minutes at a time? And are the wrists straight? So there's a checklist that you can take back with you if you want to take a look and audit a workstation. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time here with respect to home offices. When I designed this training, I was thinking, okay, here's a company with a work from home policy, but I'd say we're all in this sent home kind of state right now. Most people have been sent home with a laptop, and there were a range of challenges that people are running into. And to be totally fair, this picture that I put on the slide is maybe an optimistic view of what your home office might look like. I'm going to suggest that most of our home offices probably look like this right now. Okay, so if you think about the challenges that you are running into today in your makeshift, potentially home office, let's step through kind of what some of those challenges are that people are facing. So again, we're going to potentially be in a situation where equipment is not being adjusted correctly. That may be because, again, we don't know how to adjust the equipment correctly. We don't know sort of what the ideal is in terms of workstation heights. A standard desk is 29 inches. That is already tall for a lot of folks who are not, close to 6 feet. And kitchen tables and dining room tables can be even higher than that. So sometimes just the knowledge in terms of how do we pick the right workstation height or the right surface to work on to optimize our working position is going to be a challenge. People are going to have equipment that maybe just isn't adjustable at all. And then there's, again, the question of like, do I have time? Do I feel like I'm motivated enough to take the time to make those changes if I'm, in a situation right now where I'm really just trying to make do and get through the day? We're going to have folks who don't necessarily have the right equipment. So do they have external devices? If they don't, how are we going to get those to people? How people select the right chairs. I think there's a much bigger question kind of down the road here in terms of, depending on how long we are at this, whether companies, what they decide to do in terms of financially supporting the need to purchase equipment. But in the short term, we need to figure out how we make do and how to build the things that we need to have in our workstations now. There's a lot that can be done with stacks of copy paper and textbooks and Amazon delivery boxes in order to create monitor risers and footrests and things like that right now. And then we've got these psychosocial stressors that are happening. So people don't have social contact, people are losing their work-life balance because of this kind of bleeding of work into our regular time. And then people, to be fair, are completely stressed out now about all kinds of other, health-related, family-related issues that are going on. And so there's a lot that's happening that people are having to deal with. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how we can help people with their home offices. And then I'm going to show you some pictures of some kind of make-do things so that you might have some strategies that you can put into place right now. So the first is, how do we provide people with the knowledge and the resources to optimize their workstations as best they can? I was joking with Samantha when we started this that, people are really working in non-ideal work situations. And so physiotherapists may be in a good business state a couple of months from now because people's low backs and shoulders and things are going to suffer from these sort of makeshift workstations if we don't take the time to get them set up properly now. And so again, when we talk about training, can you get some videos up on your intranet that provide people with resources, some articles up for your staff? I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about how to set up a home office that is up on the OHS Insider site. And so you should have access to the how to set up a home office article. And if you still need it, let me know and I can send it out to you again. We have recently created a 1-hour webinar on how to set up your home office. So it's a step-by-step kind of how do you make do, and it's got videos in it about, how to adjust things, how to find the right chair and the right workstation. And that is now available for purchase at a discount for OHS members. So you can reach out to me if you feel that putting something like that up on your intranet might be helpful. And we actually, and I know lots of other people now, are starting to do ergonomic assessments by phone and by Zoom. So there's lots of stuff that's up and coming in terms of providing people with resources and training so that they can do the best they can to get their home offices set up. And then we need to think about kind of what those minimum equipment standards might be if we're into this longer. So I've had lots of requests from clients to, help them find the most cost-effective chair we can. It might not be the chair that we would pick for an office in a corporation, but one that will make do for home use. The best priced cheap chairs and keyboards and mice that we can find for people. Again, if you need risers, if you need footrests, those things can really be built usually from things that you've got around the house. And so if you need suggestions for any of those equipment things, I can point you at some local vendors if that would be helpful. So let's talk about some of the things that you can do. So I have already stated, and I'm just going to kind of go back a step, that if you are using a laptop, it should be docked with an external keyboard and a mouse. So that is the number one recommendation, is that you're not working directly off of your laptop. That being said, listen, there are times where I have to supervise Lego building so it doesn't evolve into a lot of fighting between my children. And so I will take my laptop, I will undock it from my office, and I put my laptop on the dining room table so that I can supervise at the same time as trying to get a few things done. If I'm doing that, then the photo on the left, you'll see there's a 3-ring binder underneath the laptop. When you put a 3-ring binder underneath the laptop, it raises the height of the screen so that your head does not have to tilt quite so far forward to view the screen. So it puts the neck in a better position. The other is that most kitchen tables and dining room tables are just a little bit too high. And so when you work on the keyboard, your hands are higher than your elbows. And so tilting the keyboard on that 3-ring binder will actually sort of promote that upward angle. And so you don't get the same contact pressure on the front edge of the forearms, and the wrists end up in a straighter position. So that is a short term, I need to work at the dining room table because there's some other stuff going on, way in order to optimize your posture. If your office chair is not great, if you're sitting on the kitchen chair, you can roll a towel. A hand towel is a great size. Put some elastic bands around it. You can even stuff a towel into an old set of pantyhose and tie them around the back of the chair to keep it in place. You can do that to get better lumbar support. And again, I've mentioned if you need a monitor riser or a footrest, stacks of paper, cardboard boxes, the Harry Potter novel series, because the books are nice and thick, work well as monitor risers. And you may have all forgotten that you likely have a height adjustable desk in your house. It's often referred to as an ironing board. So in particular, if you are petite and are finding that table surface is high and your shoulders are getting sore, your neck is getting sore, you can try getting your keyboard ideally separated from your laptop, so an external keyboard, put it on an ironing board, and you can adjust that ironing board to your perfect elbow height in order to get the best position that you can while you're working. But ideally, the goal is to get into a situation that looks more like this. Okay, so the chair supports the low back, best chair you can find in your house. The less ideal the chair is, the more often you need to move around, change chairs, change where you're sitting to kind of get in the best posture. Get the feet supported on some kind of footrest if you need to. If you are under 5'7" or 8, and you're working at your kitchen table, the dining room table, odds are you probably need a footrest. Elbows should be at 90, top of the screen, level with the eyes, and you've got those external devices in use. Okay, so that's kind of the main takeaway that I really wanted to get for the office. I'm just going to touch on vehicle ergonomics quickly, and then I'll make sure that we've got time to answer some questions, because I suspect we may have a few more today with respect to the home office questions. So in-vehicle workstations are also something that are happening more often. We get sales staff, we get emergency services, utilities doing a lot of in-vehicle work. And so there are a lot of challenges kind of associated with how you set up a computer workstation in a vehicle. There is not nearly the amount of space that folks need in order to get in postures. The location of the mount sort of promotes twisting of the upper body, and often you just sort of can't adjust things, with a ton of range with a lot of the equipment that is available now. So how do we do this in the best way possible? So again, no matter what we choose to do, we've got to make sure that employees have some kind of training on how to adjust these things in vehicles to the best of their ability, to their own size and stature. But probably the biggest piece is making sure that we select the right kinds of mounts for vehicles and the right kind of technology for vehicles. So mounts that provide some height adjustability, that provide some ability to swivel. You'll see in this photo, this laptop actually kind of slides over to the passenger side and then can slide back over towards the driver. It's angle adjustable. Really, usually what has to happen, especially if you're installing these things for a fleet, is that you get a couple of different samples of mounts. You mount them, you send your staff out, you trial it, you collect feedback in order to make sure that you are selecting the right style of mount for your purpose. That is really the piece that if you can get that done, will go a long way to make sure that kind of the rest all fits and flows. And then again, making sure you've selected the right kind of equipment. The criticality of setting things up properly has to do with how often people are using it. So, if you're not using the device very often, it's 5 minutes at a time, you can get away with non-ideal working postures. If people are using it for much more extended periods of time, then we have to be so much more critical about how we set it up to really get people in the best posture. It's exactly the same concept if you think about your home office. I don't need to get into the best possible posture when I'm sitting at my dining room table for 20 or 30 minutes. But when I'm sitting and doing work for a 4-hour block, it's really much more important that I'm doing that in my office, that I've got my monitor at the right height, that I'm setting things up correctly. And so, those postures become more important now because we're doing these things for much longer periods of time than maybe we would have done in the past. I do want to point out a couple of resources that are available to you. So hopefully people are aware of msdprevention.com. It is the site and the location of the Ontario Musculoskeletal Prevention Program. It's funded by the Ministry of Labour. It's sort of the go-to location in Ontario, and I know lots of other jurisdictions are using it, even those outside of Canada now, because there's such a great resource library within this site. But you can basically search for, an office ergonomics checklist. You can search for an in-vehicle computing checklist. You can search for a backlifting checklist, and it's got an absolutely huge resource library available. So this was taken from that site, so you can take a look at that if that's something that applies to you. We have created for clients and have provided you here with one as well, which is also a vehicle ergonomics checklist. This one is not just for in-vehicle computing. It's also about how you adjust the seating in a vehicle, how you adjust the steering wheel and the monitor and the mirrors and sort of position yourself in order to optimize body posture as best you can. And it's a 2-page one, so there's 2 pages in there for you to have access to. I want to make sure that we've got lots of time for questions, so I'm actually going to kind of hold it there to provide us with time for questions. The email, if anyone has questions they want to send to me directly, or there's resources you're looking for where I might be able to point you in the right direction, feel free to send me an email at the info email address that's on the screen there. If you can just identify that you're from this particular webinar, that'll just help me to make sure that I'm giving you resources kind of from the right place. And if you let me know where you are geographically, I can do my best to point you at the right resources with respect to that as well. So Sam, do you want to see if we've got any questions and send those over my way?
Hi, yes, thank you. So again, I just want to give everyone a reminder. So if you go to your question panel, you drop down and you just type in your question. At the moment, we don't have any questions, so we're just going to give you a couple of minutes to post those through.
If anyone has questions about how to pick the right, whatever you've got in your house and what your best makeshift solution is right now, I'm happy to help with some of those as well.
Okay, so our questions are starting to come through. So Rachel, is there a virtual ergonomic, assessment that employees can take from home?
I assume that question is about a self-assessment. I don't have a self-assessment checklist. I mean, I think the slide that I had earlier that had kind of the questions about, is your chair supporting your back? Is your monitor at eye level? Like if you want to send somebody a really simple self-assessment, I would use that. I would simply use the sort of 6 questions that are in there. If you're looking for an assessment done by an ergonomist virtually, then we are doing 15-minute calls with people just to kind of step them through that by telephone and providing people with feedback. And so that is a service that I can provide if available. If you're looking for a much more detailed office ergonomics checklist, then the MSD Prevention website does have a office ergonomics checklist that I think is 2 or 3 pages long.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to answer the next couple because it's just about resources. So the question Andrea asked was, can we get a print copy of this webinar? So Andrea, we do share the PDF version of the PowerPoint with you. We don't scribe the webinar though, so you'll just get the PDF of Rachel's webinar. And Joanne Little, where was it we could get the OHS video from for home office? So it's not a video, just to let you know, unless Rachel, you specifically talked about a video. I know you talked about an article that's on OHS Insider. I will also add this to the email today, but did you mention a video?
So our company has put together a home office webinar. It's a 50-minute how to set up your own home office, and it is available for purchase for discount for OHS members. So people can contact me if they are interested in getting a hold of that for their corporate intranet site.
Brilliant. And to everyone, I will also add Rachel's details, the info, to the email I send you after this webinar. So Kelsey has asked, what would you recommend for a good makeshift standing desk?
Okay, so the best standing desk, it depends how tall you are. Your kitchen counter or kitchen island is a good starting position. So you're going to have to take a walk around your house and find a piece of furniture that is as close to elbow height as you can. So the goal is basically when you throw your keyboard on that surface, that it is about where if you bend your elbows to 90 degrees, your fingertips would sort of hit flat on that surface, or it lines up with the bottom of your elbow. So I would try the buffet in your dining room. I would try your kitchen counter. If you've got a filing cabinet that's tall, that might do. And if your kitchen counter is a little bit low, which if you're kind of more than average height, it probably is, then I would suggest that if you've got a couple of butcher block cutting boards, that you put them under your laptop, or your turkey pan, if you invert it upside down, or put your Amazon box on top of your kitchen counter, you can use that as a standing desk. Again, if you're looking at sort of moving through a range of postures and you're just going to stand for half an hour, it doesn't need to be perfect. And the recommendation generally would be that if you're looking at using a standing desk, you really shouldn't be standing for more than sort of 30 minutes at a time. Standing generally will create back pain faster than sitting does. So it's really about changing postures more often rather than doing any of them for a really long period of time. So it doesn't have to be perfect when you're doing it for a short period of time.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So that looks like all the questions for now. I'm just going to give us a couple more. Oh, no, we've got one more come in.
Your ironing board might go tall enough for standing, but it depends on the style of your ironing board. So you could try that too.
Okay. So we have a message, a question from Kat. Decades ago, I was taught that I shouldn't rest my hands on anything when typing.
Okay.
Is that still the case now?
So people who are touch typists, like fairly skilled touch typists, when they start typing, the hands naturally lift off the table and the wrists will float while typing. And that really is the ideal sort of method for typing because you don't get any contact pressure on the underside of the wrist. So many people have heard of carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel is that sort of space in the wrist. And when you're leaning heavily on a work surface, you are putting compression through those soft tissues in that area. So we do prefer to see people who float when they type. That being said, a lot of people find that that is just not doable for them. And so it is acceptable to kind of have some support on the hands, but generally the goal would be to have that pressure more on the palm of the hand or to have that pressure further up on the forearm and to try to avoid anything right over the wrist. And also to make sure that you are in contact with something that is flat, not on the edge of a desk. So if you flip back through the slides, you'll see when the laptop was on a 3-ring binder, there was actually a little gel wrist rest in front of that. And that is just so if you do find you're resting on a sharp edge, those gel wrist rests are better. Generally, we don't like to add them just for the sake of it because they, again, will add contact pressure. But if you're on a sharp edge, then it's really kind of about the lesser of evils and trying to get on something that is a little flatter, a little bit softer, and not directly over the wrist.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question because that was incredibly interesting. Kat also says thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
we've got again another message about the video. Just to remind everyone, I will send Rachel's contact information in the email that I forward to you all. So watch out for that by lunchtime today, and then you can contact Rachel directly to get information on this home workstation video. Okay, so that looks to be all the questions we have. So as we're coming to the end of the webinar today, I just want to remind everyone that we have webinars. We're currently having them on a weekly, sometimes 2 in a week at the moment, because we want to be able to provide you with as much information to try and get you through this time as possible. So as you can see here, on April the 15th, we've got compensation solutions for a bad economy. And then in May, to celebrate Mental Health Week in Canada, we have got Dangerous Days, handling negative emotions during a pandemic, which I'm sure will be a popular one. And we've got the recent OHS cases you should know about. But like I said, we have got a lot coming in at the moment. So just keep an eye on your inbox. On a Monday, we announce the webinars, and on a Wednesday, we announce webinars. To ensure our emails do get through to you, just make sure you check your spam as well. But I want to personally thank Rachel for today's webinar, and thank you all for attending. I hope you got everything out. I certainly found that incredibly interesting as I work from home full time. If you do have any questions or feedback about today's webinar, I do encourage you to send an email through to webinars@bongard.com, or you can send it directly to myself, which is samanthas@bongard.com. But for now, Rachel, I just want to send a warm thank you. Thank you for having us, and that's kind of the end of today's webinar. We hope to see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.